This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Care Notes with Doug Wilbur from Cherish Companions. And Doug, I hear that there's something new that's going on in the state of Ohio, that there's licensing now for agencies.
There is. So it's relatively new. The state of Ohio has required from October of last year, I believe, is the effective timing for companies that do this to be licensed. There are a couple loopholes in there for like really, really small operators. But otherwise, if you're doing this in the state of Ohio and you're doing, anything but, what ultimately should look like taking care of your grandfather on your own or something like that, you should be licensed in. And it's weird because there are a number of companies that just were not even aware of it. So there are companies that have no idea even to this point in time that there is a licensure. And so there are folks that probably are operating without a license, which, I would not want to be that person. And you definitely don't want that person taking care of your family member, in that situation. And, one of the things that I think is important is to understand why licensure, what the advantages are.
Sure.
In many ways, I tend to believe that too much government control can stifle innovation and have other issues. And I tend to believe that the free market does work fairly well in regulating and other things, but with certain things having to do with health and welfare and other things, it's important to have a licensing procedure so that if someone is not operating in a good way, you can pull that license, and so possibly get rid of unscrupulous people that may be involved in this. And most people who do this are not by any stretch of the imagination unscrupulous. Most of them are doing because they want to do the right thing and are wanting to help people. And but that's one of the advantages of having licensure. I'm part of the Home Care Association of America. In Ohio, I'm actually the vice chair, and we worked really hard in the whole licensing procedure. We've been working on this, kind of having working groups that we're working on trying to get licensure in the state of Ohio, and so when it came, when things were started getting proposed, I actually, was on the meeting with the person who was involved in getting the legislation through and trying to talk and say, this is what's important. Here's what needs to be a part of that, or we believe, representing the group, not me individually. We believe these are some of the important things that need to be in the provisions. But I will tell you, at this point in time, the biggest part of licensure is, and the reason that we were starting this was consumer protection. People who are getting care to have, some sort of protections for them. Good companies were doing this before, which was getting background checks. That was built in, having certain standards in hiring folks. And so the licensure, it at least codified best practices. And I will tell you that the biggest part of what licensure in the state of Ohio now is around like doing background checks. That was a big impetus, even for the sponsor, to get things going, because they had heard of a situation that actually happened in the Cleveland area, that they felt like if there had been background checks, it might have protected the family, from having some issues that ended up happening. And so that was a big thrust in it, and that's like a big part of what the legislation is currently about. And that's a basic. You should do things like background checks. A good company will also go, steps further and do reference checks. They'll make sure that they do interviews that are substantial, and in order to be able to get a hold of the right folks. But just starting from the beginning, no questions asked. The anyone who is getting care in Ohio should have, you should ask, are you licensed? And just know that that's like the basic. Okay. You have to, in order to operate, you really do need a license. And if someone isn't doing it, they're likely either really, 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 really small, or they're operating outside of the jurisdiction that they need to. And I will say this, is that there are some companies, I think, that it may still be in pending status. That doesn't mean that anything's wrong. It just means it took them a long time to get through the pile of applications that people had. And so if someone's pending, I don't think I would have a lot of fear in using them as well, because they did the due diligence to get their application in. It's just taking a while is all.
Sure.
So,
well, anything like that doesn't really happen overnight. Like, you wanted it to start last October, and maybe the word hasn't even gotten around to some people, or maybe some of these smaller agencies are thinking, well, it doesn't apply to me. Because I heard that from somebody the other day. She wanted to start doing home care. And I said to her, what kind of training do you have? And she said, well, I used to take care of my grandmother. And I said, but that's not training. Okay. It's the same way, I raised 2 boys, but it doesn't mean that I should be out there being a nanny or taking care of children with special needs. I don't have the training other than I lived it, and that's just not enough. And we have to hold people accountable, and especially if they're with our elderly family members who may not know everything that is happening around them.
Right. Well, and one thing too is I think the licensure, excuse me, is as I mentioned, a basic thing you need to look at: are they licensed? The second thing is, if they're not licensed, my suggestion would be, that would not be an organization that I think I would want to take care of, because why aren't they? It's, you'd really want to ask, why is someone not licensed? The second thing I think that's important, and this is going away from the licensure, because the licensure is largely around, application, certain basic standards coming under the health department's, guidance and other things. is is a company tied in with a larger organization? And I don't mean like a franchise. I mean, like, are they a part of the Home Care Association of America? Are they with an organization that has, critical standards? Um, so to be a part of the Home Care Association of America, just as an example, you have to meet certain standards to, be a part of that. Um, and and so I think that's important because it also shows, I think, an interest in the field that you're in, upholding certain standards within that field, and an interest to learn, grow, and associate with others that are trying to raise the standard rather than just kind of getting along. And so if an organization is not a part of it, and I would even go a step further, are you active within it? If someone's not active within, an organization, I really do think you should question, how they're operating and their interests. Because anything, like, it would be like having your doctor, and they're, they went to medical school basically in that situation, which, and then have no interest in learning or growing or whatever.
Right.
Well, if you went to medical school 30 years ago and that's how you're still practicing medicine, and you're not learning, growing, going to meetings where you're expanding your knowledge, you're going to catch some things, but you're really not going to be at the cutting edge of anything, anything. And I think most of us want our doctors to be, if any, more on the cutting edge.
Sure. Absolutely.
As far as learning. You may have a cautious doctor that doesn't prescribe the newest drug right away, and that just is sometimes temperament, where they want to see that it doesn't get recalled or something like
Right.
that. Um, but um, but heck, you want someone who knows about the drug,
Absolutely.
and
Under this certification, I know you said, background checks is really important, and I totally agree. I mean, I'm doing this part-time job where I visit hospitals and I take care of a piece of equipment, the same equipment in each of the hospitals. And I had to go through a background check, and every 6 months it gets reviewed. And so I'm coming up to my 6 months, and I got an email today that said, are you willing to sign off on another background check? I am. I'm not concerned about it. But if there was something in my background, should I be the one going in to the hospitals because I have credentials? I go as far as outside of the operating rooms. So, I think that's important. But does this certification also include how each level of personnel needs to be trained? So can you be an aide without any training?
So yes, you can, but part of that is not because there's something wrong with that, because you have to understand that in home care we do everything from at one end, like more companionship, to the other end where you have very intensive care, where it in some ways is more like a nursing home, and there someone may be bedbound and
Sure.
need to be turned frequently, or have significant transfers. So I don't think that the law should say you have to have certain skill sets, um, because of the fact of that variance. But I do believe a company needs to have certain standards for doing it, and those standards, need to be based on skill sets or skills assessment or other things. Now, again, that said, if you can get an SCNA in like 4 weeks of training, so you may have someone that's done this for 20 years. Does 4 weeks ultimately trump 20 years of experience? I think you could make an argument that 20 years of experience has given someone a lot of knowledge and understanding and things. And so, one of the things that we do, and this is now more from an agency level, and that this is where I think it's important and why having a big agency can make a difference, or a larger agency. We employ a nurse, and matter of fact, we employ a couple nurses to be involved in a lot of the hands-on work, and so those folks that we have in the nursing capacity are doing things like training assessment. So we actually assess the skill level of caregivers that are coming in, even people with STNAs or training that is certified. We'll look at it, and if we don't feel like it's up to our standards, we'll have them come back for more training. So just because someone has an STNA does not, in my opinion, mean that that's a stamp of approval, at least not for us as an organization. And I would say the vast majority of people, even with STNAs, we may get further training on certain things to bring them up to our standards.
When I was in the hospital back in June, I had two people who were being trained, and they came in and asked me, University Hospital happens to be a training hospital, so you have a choice to say no, but I said okay. And I was amazed at how much these young women wanted to learn.
Oh yeah.
It just, and so the fact that you do training, I think, is phenomenal, because you might find somebody who walks in the door and doesn't really have all the skills right now, but you pick up on the fact that, hey, with some training, they're going to be excellent.
Yeah, it's and that's why we hire for heart, not just skills. We look at because if someone really wants to learn and train and stuff, we can give them that training and a foundation that we can continually build on and build in those skill sets that they're going to require to be really good at what they do. I will say also that we have a large. You've been to our place. It's a large space that we have. So we have a learning lab. We have a Hoyer lift there, hospital bed. We have training dummies that we use, and that kind of love for learning that you were talking about. That's one of the things when they do national surveys for caregivers. One of the things that they're noticing is that a lot of these caregivers really want training. Now you have some that are kind of like that fictional or non-fictional doctor that I mentioned that got done with medical school and didn't want to learn anything more. They had all the knowledge they needed in their own mind, and so but at this those are folks that I don't think you really want working with you or working for you, whether it be a doctor or an aide.
Sure, absolutely.
But one of the biggest things that caregivers do want is they want in these national polls and national surveys more training. So we've built in a really robust training schedule, and we even have kind of our equivalent of a I wouldn't say it's an SDNA, but it's it's kind of our equivalent of training that we feel like prepares someone for a home setting. And if they can achieve that, they can actually get paid at a higher rate
Sure.
for doing it. So we are, putting money where our mouth is as far as saying training is important. We pay our folks when they train. It's not, oh, we offer training, but we actually pay them for their time in training. So as to incentivize again folks to be doing that. And I would say that most companies don't do that. It's expensive. Training is a huge commitment,
Right.
and is expensive. Another thing having to do with standards, I guess we've kind of morphed the standards, away from the original thing as far as the licensure. But we do random drug screens so that drugs are one of those big things in our society that are kind of the X factor that can really cause issues or problems. Unfortunately, people who are doing drugs can be very good liars because they're very desperate to get what they want. And I would say that, if someone's addicted to drugs, and I know this is going to sound kind of sweeping and stuff, but they're going to be liars because one way or another they need that in order to get what they're wanting.
Sure.
And so someone can seem really sweet or wonderful or skilled or other things like that, and because they're addicted to drugs, they can fool you. And so I really think that doing random drug screens ongoing is good because you never know when you're going to get pulled. And so for that reason, we're considered by the state of Ohio a drug-free workplace. And again, I think that's one of those critical things. Ultimately, and being licensed by the state is the basic, but really companies themselves have to have internally very high standards saying this is what we're going to do, this is what good looks like, and we will hold to that standard, and really develop that as on an as needed basis, based on what is going on right now. So for example, maybe if we were talking about the 1940s or 1950s, drugs probably were not the thing you were worried about with someone going in. You might worry about other things, but it wasn't drugs,
Right.
And so, but as the world has changed and the needs have changed, companies have to say, okay, this is a problem. We need to do something about it. What are we going to do? And then set the standards, as an agency to be able to say, this is how we're going to approach this. We see that this is something that we want to get ahead of and prevent it from being a problem. So
before we close out, my question to you is, if I'm calling your company because I'm looking for a caregiver for a loved one, what are some of the questions that I can ask to find out if you belong to other organizations, if you have the licensure, do I get to see a copy of it if I'm going to hire you?
Well, you can actually look it up. So you can go on
Okay.
the state and look it up. Although it's not as easy to look it up as it seems. I think when I was trying to look ours up, it like didn't show up when I typed in one thing, and then it showed up when I typed another thing in. So it's probably best just to ask, are you licensed by the state? Then first and foremost, and you could potentially, I guess, ask their license number if you wanted to. It's on the printed document. So I would ask, are you licensed? I would ask, um, are you, an employee-based model? Do you, is liability on me? Someone fell in my house, or is liability on you?
Interesting. Okay.
Is it workers' comp, or is it going against my homeowner's insurance? And are you paying their taxes, or is it in no man's zone? Which means that maybe I'm responsible for paying, their
Right.
payroll taxes, and could the government come after me in a couple of years in those situations? So I would ask that, who's the actual employee or employer in this situation, because that also affects things like supervision and other things, because you're if you're the employer, you are then the supervisor as well. In that case, I would also ask what associations they're a part of. I would listen to see if they say they're part of the Home Care Association of America, because I think that's the one that is very specific to our industry, and that has standards that are tied in with that. I would ask, does the state of Ohio consider you a drug-free environment, or follow those standards that you could be classified as a drug-free environment, or drug-free workplace, as I think is actually the proper wording for it. I would ask what what their training looks like. Do they have ongoing training? Do they pay differently for people that achieve training milestones? Do they pay actually for their caregivers' training?
Right.
Do they have a nurse on staff that who is doing training or some sort of supervisory role? I think that, obviously this is a basic, but do they have,
Sure.
liability insurance and professional, insurance, as well. I personally would ask what their interviewing process looks like. What percentage of people that come to them do they actually, in the end, hire? Are they hiring 90% of the people who apply, or are they hiring at the other end
Right.
of based on standards or criteria that they have? Are they doing one interview, or are they doing multiple interviews? And what's their orientation like? Those are all critical things, because what that actually shows is what kind of standards does this company have. And the measure in many ways is more, are they working to a higher standard? And I mean, that's what that really reflects. Sure. Is, are they working to a higher standard? Are they working to it? Someone might miss, or not do certain things and may do other things, but overall, you really want that, and you don't want kind of a slick answer. If you feel like people are moving the shells around as they're talking to you, you shouldn't be comfortable with that.
Exactly.
You don't, and in the end, this is whether you're talking, on the phone for the individuals, or if you're talking to, an owner or someone in charge, or who is doing things, you really need to know, do I trust this individual, or do I feel like I can trust this individual?
Right.
Do I get that feeling like, someone has my interests in mind, or do I get the feeling that this is all about the company? Because if you have a gut feeling this is all about the company, I don't care who it is, even if it's us, you need to go with another company, because you need to have a feeling of trust and cooperation, and we're working together, and that this individual, because I mean, let's face it, anytime where you're dealing with humans and schedules, you're going to have things that are going to pop up.
Oh,
You
sure.
just need to know that the company is working through it as with you, and that is not what they're aiming for, or what their standards are. And again, if one person fails in that process, which might happen, they're gonna work through it. They're gonna do it. The other couple questions I think I would ask is, how large is their pool of caregivers? It's a big difference if someone has 20 caregivers, or if they have 200 caregivers that they're doing, because it allows flexibility, or if someone calls off, have someone else jump in,
Sure.
Things of that nature. Are they open? And what I mean by open, do they have someone available 24 hours a day? So that if there was an emergency and it was after hours, you can actually get a hold of a human being.
Right.
One thing I think you should look at very carefully is, when you call an office, are you actually getting a real human being, or are you getting an answering machine? That you should get a real human being. One of my things is, we answer our calls. Someone calls in, I hate the large hospital systems where you call in and you get a prompting, press 1,
Right.
press 2, things like that. That drives me bonkers. I think that, especially when you understand who your audience is,
Sure.
Our audience is largely people who are older, or who are in crisis. They need someone to answer the phone, and during regular office
Right.
hours at the very least. And so it should be simple. You pick up the phone, you call it, you get a human being, they help you out, and things like that. And if you're getting voice prompts and things, people hide behind that sometimes, and they don't get back in touch with you and whatever. And that's probably a harbinger of things to come. So
You're just bringing back memories from 7 years ago. But I will say, as somebody who's been through this, when I got those voice recordings, okay, I usually didn't even leave a message, because it
yeah,
was like, I need to talk to somebody now. Like you said, we were sort of in crisis mode. And those that answered their phone and talked to me and were able to give me information and either made appointments with me almost right away, I knew that they had, my mother's, welfare in mind, and they had mine.
right.
And, sadly, some of the ones that didn't answer their phones right away, maybe they were going through their own crisis on that day. So we have to give them a little bit of a break. But I do know, when I've been at your office, there's always somebody answering the phone. And if your receptionist isn't at her phone, I can hear somebody else answering it.
Oh,
So,
yeah, no. That I will tell you, that's one of my pet peeves. And does it ever get to the point where, I mean, on most days, there's probably 12 to 14 people that are dedicated to answering the phones. Does it ever get where all the phone lines are full? Yeah, but it's rare. I mean, it is a far exception for that because and then our goal is to get back to people right away if they do leave a message, if that happens, because I mean, my staff knows that drives me crazy that we didn't get that call.
exactly.
And again, it's because I noticed. I mean, for heaven's sake, it was I had to call in, I think, for a prescription, and I won't say which hospital system, but one of the hospital systems. And it was on the hold to get a renewal for a prescription or to talk to someone uh, for like half an hour one day, or 40 minutes was one of the specialty offices. And then at the end, like it sounded like it was going to connect and it cut me off.
Oh,
And then I thought, I have to get back on now, and I have to wait another whatever amount of time. And I thought there is something really, really wrong with this. It may have actually been to schedule an appointment um, for it. Anyway, the long and the short of it is there was something not very good about that situation, and I was not a happy camper.
I don't
And
blame you, and I think most of us have had those similar experiences. Um, well, I
anyway,
am glad to know that licensure, did go through, and it's something that we can keep looking at and seeing how well it's working out for, those of us who need those services.
yeah, and good thing is it's through in the state. I mean, it's gone through in the state. It's being implemented, and as time goes on, there will be more and different standards that are going to be happening. But this is the foothold. This is where it's starting. And then some of the questions that I had mentioned, I do believe that will help people in making a guided or a good choice when they're going through a difficult time. So, well, I hope that you have a great week,
Yeah,
and
I hope
everyone.
everybody has a great week, and as we go into the next month. So
Sounds
everybody
good.
take care.
Take
Talk to you
care.
soon. Bye-bye now.
Thanks. Bye bye.